Hi, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone. So we have Grandmaster Boris Abruk with us. So now for the third session of this 52 week of by Grandmaster Boris Abruk. He is considered as the god of opening, no doubt. So welcome, Boris. So you can now take the session. Over to you.
Thank you. Well, good evening, good day, good morning, everyone. So here I am again, excited to continue with my 52 hours course. Well, today's topic, will be Italian. So I would call it slow Italian with knight f6, knight f6 and bishop e7. You probably noticed that we are maybe one lesson behind the schedule. Hopefully, I'll catch up later with the just regular schedule. I think it's right now, it's not a big deal, but I just found like the lines that I showed to you very important to cover. So, okay, so here we are. This is the initial position that we covered in our previous classes, and the topic was the topic of our previous class was actually knight g5 move, aggressive move, challenging move that well, especially black players have to know in order to play this line. Now today we'll focus on other main approach, which is like d3, a d3 move that we call usually slow Italian, which means that usually this type of positions lead to more positional maneuvering play, but with a lot of positional nuances that hopefully I can cover for you in today's session. So I would like to mention, guys, it's very important that you understand that we have no time to cover everything, and I'm trying to go with the major lines. So for instance, in this position, besides knight g5 and d3, which is two major moves, white has some other options. And since we have no time to cover these, let's say I just want maybe like briefly to mention a few opportunities. There is even, I noticed there is even move castle for white in this position. White can even castle, but I don't think it's too serious. We can easily accept the pawn sacrifice and we should be all right here. So no doubts about this. Now other options, there is this move that potentially can play it on low level, but also I was surprised to discover that there are games of top players. For instance, last year Wesley Saw against Mamedjarov. This move we can play slow Italian. There is nothing wrong about this. We can do setup with the bishop on e7. We can play bishop c5 setup, but at the same time, it's very important that this move allows knight e4, and that's very important to mention this idea. So the point is that after knight a4, we have d5 in this position. Just one more thing, it's important to understand that this is not very dangerous. It looks maybe a little bit scary since our king a little bit misplaced, but bishop pair plus very strong center would probably just give like clear advantage to black. And knight g5, I don't think there is anything there. We can retreat to g8 and follow up with h6, and that should be a very comfortable position for black. Honestly, some advantage. Now, so after knight a4, obviously d5 comes, and here I noticed the main line is bishop d3, d4, bishop e4, bishop d6, and that's my point. We don't go deep here, but just like let's say this setup kind of like recommended, and it's supposed to be good for black because white center is eliminated and black has just a comfortable development and comfortable position. One more line that I would like to mention, it's of course d4. d4. Now after d4, black usually captures on d4, and now we have all this theoretical stuff where one direction is castle, and we can play knight a4 in this position, as well as bishop c5. So for instance, one of the lines, probably like a fascinating line, you're probably familiar with this, like d5, bishop d5, queen d5, knight c3. From what I understand, black is doing well according to the current theory with either queen h5 or queen a5. So I don't think there are like any problems in this direction. It's just kind of like existing theory, so you should just briefly check. And and there is another important, which is probably the main move in this situation, is to play e5. And then I find, well, despite the fact that there are some other moves, maybe I think knight g4, there are games with knight g4, but but d5 definitely the critical move in this position. Now ef6, as far as I understand, is not really playable. So bishop b5 is the move, knight e4, knight takes d4, and now there is an old well-known move, bishop d7, bishop c6, bc6. There is this line, but there is actually the modern approach where bishop c5 is played, bishop c5, and it seems like black is doing pretty well according to the existing theory, and with the point that after castle there is a pawn sacrifice, castle. But if it's captured on c6, we'll have some ideas with bishop a6, as well as attacking f2 with queen h4 and so on. So as far as I understand, that's a good standing here for black as well in this variation. Okay, so now finally we switch to the slow Italian with the main move d3. Now today we'll focus on bishop e7 system. Other lessons, the follow-up lessons, we'll cover bishop c5, but we'll cover bishop c5 through third bishop c5 move order. So today we'll have d3 and bishop e7. Again, guys, there are some other moves. I know, like the one to mention here is like h6. I have seen some games recently by strong players, h6 with the setup d6, g6, bishop g7, or even g5. All this, like, you know, there are many existing sidelines. So again, as I mentioned, unfortunately, we don't have time for everything. So that's already your homework. So after bishop e7, after bishop e7, we castle. I don't think any other move for white will make kind of like sense and independent value. I mean, white potentially can go c3, but all this would eventually transpose. So like, we'll talk about this position. So there is also the reason why I'm not covering d6, which is a normal move order in general, but I want to mention also extra possibilities for black connected with d7, d5 in one move. After castle, we arrive to, I would say, initial position of this variation. So we have like a few different setups for white, but I would say that in general, statistically, rook e1, the top choice by far, and the reason for that, to prevent that with this move attacking e5. So, well, not exactly attacking, but in case of d5, e5 pawn is hanging. So like basically this move prevents d7, d5 like if what black wants to carry out this in one move. So at least this. Now instead of rook e1, I would like to mention a few other ideas. In most of the cases, it's very important that black gets this opportunity d7, d5. So we have let's say a4. A4 have been played more than 350 times. Now we always have d6. D6 is always with us, and it just will transpose to kind of like similar positions. However, maybe let's say in this position after d6, white doesn't need to waste time. Well, it's not exactly a waste of time, but that doesn't need to play rook e1 and can continue knight d2 or a5 immediately. So that's why I think it's very important that black maintains d7, d5 idea in one move. And here usually we have a very tricky positions. It's of course one of the major strategical ideas for black, if not the main one, to deliver d7, d5 at the appropriate moment. So of course it comes like once it comes at such an early stage, there is some vulnerability in the center. So that's the question how black is able to handle e5 pawn and so on. So in this position, I think what I checked, black, in my opinion, doing pretty well, even despite there are like 100 games and many strong players try this position for white. From what I checked, let's say the move like knight d2 obviously runs into bishop g4, so that seems to me quite a nice position. So I always believe rook e1 is critical, and then to see how black is able to protect pawn on e5. Now, after rook e1, for instance, if we play move like f6, obviously it weakens the diagonal, and there will be d4 coming, very powerful. But the point that we don't really need to protect right away, so we have this bishop g4, very important move, and with the point that after h3 in this position, we don't need to give up the bishop, and we can easily play bishop h5. That's a very important point that to understand, and this is happening due to the fact that if white decides to win central pawn, black will obtain a very powerful compensation in the Marshall spirit. You know, there is the Marshall gambit in Ruy Lopez. I think it's even much better version. The king is vulnerable, and I think black is clearly with better development. That's very dangerous position for white. So that means that that's probably not the best, not the best move to react. So, but by the way, I would like to mention that, yeah, I guess after bishop h5, we can see just a slow play with knight d2. Knight d2 and so on, as well as I noticed, like in my notes, I have actually the opportunity to play bishop f3. Actually, since d4 square is not covered, and we maintain the possibility of playing knight d4. So, for instance, we play this move knight b6 right now, and with the next move knight d4 might come. So I think black is doing really well in both directions. We don't have too many problems, and the fact that, let's say, bishop a2 runs into knight a4, so white cannot even save the bishop. So I guess knight d2 should be played, and we can just take on c4 and probably follow up with f6, and that's very comfortable for black, full equality in my opinion. So that's about a4. Now, instead of a4, of course, c3 is just like a normal move in this position, c3. So we can play d6, as we'll see the positions in our main line. But once again, there is d5. There is d5, and I think it's working well. d5, e d5, knight d5. So we have kind of like similar play after rook e1. I would like to mention, if white decides to prevent bishop g4, that usually quite annoying move. We have a very important idea, knight to b6, so we can target light square bishop, with the point that after bishop b5, I think we can play queen d5, once again targeting the bishop with good play, while meanwhile bishop b3 runs into bishop f5. So it's probably even better version for black, as d3 pawn vulnerable after white played c3. So now let's come back to this position, rook e1. So we have to move bishop g4 as usual here, h3, and I think here for sure no reason to give up the bishop. We can play bishop h5, and let's say knight d2, or once again similar line with g4, where, if I understand correctly, we even have a little bit better version to compare with previous line. There is a lot of compensation, great position for black, and I would say dangerous for white. So after knight bd2, again we can target d3 pawn with knight b6, so that practically forces bishop b5. because after bishop b3, d3 pawn is hanging. So after bishop b5, we can just protect f6. I think like we shouldn't worry about bishop c6, bc6, because much more important that we will get rid of light square bishop. So black is doing great. Black is comfortable in this position. No problems. So that's two moves that I mentioned. We can see also the games with knight c3. Knight c3, which is definitely stops d5, since knight gives like additional control over d5. So obviously we have to continue d6. And now I noticed there are some modern games here played by some strong players. I noticed that usually it's either h3 or a3. It's very interesting, very interesting choice. So those two main moves. So what is happening with h3, that we can attack the bishop and actually get light square bishop. Usually these kind of positions should be very good for black. Probably white's best chance here not to play bishop b3, but rather to give up bishop on c4. So knight takes c4, dc4. There is this very strange position that may be more known from Vienna variation, where white ends up with the knight on e2. I think overall black should be all right here with the lights, with two bishops in the future. So it's just the question how black will get a break. I think like black should be focusing on delivering f7, f5 if d5 is not working. At the same time, white can put pressure. I guess c6 will come in near future, and white can put pressure against d6 pawn. Overall, it's playable position. It's not so bad for white, I would say, but it shouldn't be something like really problematic for black. So now after a3, white is able to keep light square bishop alive, but there is another problem that comes from other side. Bishop g4 is very problematic in this position. I'm not a big fan of bishop g4 move in Italian, but that's a special case since white is unable to play knight bd2, and that's the difference, and it's very important for you to understand. So it's basically knight c3 kind of like hurts white in this type of position where black is able to pin. So now I would like to mention that there are some games also with this move that's very common. We'll see this in the future lines after bishop e6. So like knight d5 can come, and for instance, I saw some games with this move like knight d4, which is actually also a very common idea, like preparing c6, trying to simplify in the center, since we would rather not take on d5 with the bishop. That gives up the bishop pair. Now after bishop g4, I think anyway bishop g4 should be recommended. h3, bishop h5 looks pretty good for white, in my opinion. The main move in this position, bishop e3, covering at least d4 square and defending against knight d4 threat. Still, knight d4 is one possibility. Another move is queen d7, so which stops g4, and the pin still remains annoying. I guess the main point is knight d5 to eliminate the knight at least. So maybe to have in the future the possibility of playing g4 one day. So the position is overall pretty normal. It's just a complicated game with a few ideas for both sides. I think we probably should take first knight d5, bishop d5, and then there is maybe king h8 or even something like that. A very common idea where we can transfer the knight to e6 at the same time, chasing off the bishop from d5 square. So yes, okay, this is about all these lines. Now finally we'll switch to the main line with rook e1. Now there is no d5 obviously now, so d6 is practically forced move, and now we have another serious crossroad for white, with the main move being a4. It's probably kind of like surprising for you. I would say This is somewhat a modern approach, but we will definitely cover other directions. So what we have in this position, besides a4, so I would say old-fashioned c3, old-fashioned and classical c3. By the way, this type of position definitely resembles Rui Lopez with d3 as well. So some players who consistently play Rui Lopez, they shouldn't have any problem like studying this kind of systems, like Italian with c3 d3, because it's like very similar. So I would like to mention that in this position, practically there are like a few plans, but especially in this position, the one plan is by far the most popular, which is knight a5, attacking the bishop. So here, just very important to mention, I already told this like in the previous line, but bishop g4 in this very position is a very common move for kind of like lower level players, let's say, who never seriously studied the theory. And I don't like this move, because what is happening, the bishop is kind of misplaced on h5. So white can do h3, bishop h5, obviously, because I don't think there is any point giving up the bishop. And after bishop h5, knight g2. And that will be followed up by knight f1. And then after that, white will have a very pleasant choice, either to go knight g3 and attack the bishop. So bishop, once again, it's kind of dilemma for black, but there is no good option, whether you should take on f3 or go bishop g6. So bishop misplaced in both cases, or even g4 might follow up with bishop g6, knight g3. So overall, my impression from those lines, but it's very important also to distinguish, it only happens when white can play knight d2. If it's knight c3, it's a different story, like as we could see from the previous line. If knight d2 is available, the bishop overall misplaced on g4 and h5 eventually. So this is definitely very promising position. So therefore, I think knight a5 is black's best choice. So the play usually continues with bishop b5. So we play a6, bishop a4, b5, obviously bishop c2, and c5. So this is very classical pawn structure for these lines. It's I think the whole setup of black pawns, named after famous Russian player from the previous century, Chigorin, and so that a well-known line in Rui Lopez, where black plays knight a5 followed by c5. So in this position, usually we can see the move. It's very complicated position. It's very double-edged. So I think like it's the matter of knowledge and understanding the ideas. Knight d2 is pretty much the move. Now we have two major setups for black. Of course, like I'm pretty sure there are like a few different options, but my recommendation for black player would be definitely knight c6. Also very popular to leave knight on a5 and just to play rook e8, rook e8, knight f1, and right away bishop f8. So this is a well-known setup for this type of positions, which helps black to coordinate his pieces in much better way. First of all, the rook on a8, very useful for like any action in the center, which can be d4 for white or d5 for black. So rook will be very useful as well. With bishop on f8, black can follow up with g6 and bishop g7. So this is very common. Still, my impression that it's unnecessary to allow move bishop g5. I feel like bishop g5, h6, bishop h4. I'm sorry, h6, let's say bishop h4. I kind of like white position a little bit more, as potential play could be knight a3 and knight is heading to d5. Of course, it can be covered, but in my opinion, it's slightly more pleasant for white. Still very complicated. We don't have even one pair of pawns straight, so very complicated position, very playable for both sides. However, I would rather suggest for black knight c6 as a more precise setup. In this case, after knight f1, we can play h6. That's my idea. So there is no bishop g5, as we could see from the previous line. So in such a positions, like any move is possible, like that you can imagine, h3, a4, but I'll rather focus on the most popular knight g3, as well as I would like to mention, and I think it's one of the pet ideas of Magnus to in this type of position. I noticed that quite often he chooses knight a3 to compare with knight g3. So after knight a3, the play might continue rook a8. So once again, our setup. So the idea to play bishop f8 after any quiet move from white side, but let's say a4. So that's also very thematic move in this type of position. So which is trying to undermine the pawn structure on the queen side. If b4 is coming, that's obviously weakening c4. If rook b8, then we give up a file. So that's a kind of like small, but maybe in long run some significant gains for white. So that therefore there is absolutely no reason, and black can just continue bishop e6. So now, or we have a very positional play like with h3, bishop f8, and so on, or there is d4, which is obviously something to be ready for black, and black has to consider this idea all the time. So usually it's most of the games you can see in this line, it's capturing all the way to on d4. But however, in this position there is a classical game, well, in my opinion, already a classical game played by Aronian against Magnus, if I'm not mistaken. So in this position, Aronian came up with very interesting move, knight b4, instead of capturing on d4. And in my opinion, he got a very nice position. So what was a rather surprising play, I have to admit, but definitely was a preparation and deserves very, very serious attention, as like every idea of Levon Aronian, who is a high level top player. So basically taking advantage of the fact that I think like white cannot play d5 due to bishop d7, and we attacking rook on a4 as well as pawn on a4. So white played rook a1, and d5 came up at very suitable moment for black, and overall double-edged position. The game ended in a win for Magnus, but let's say objectively speaking, this position was perfectly playable for black. I think like black is not worse in this position. So this is one line, and we have knight g3, knight g3, rook e8. Once again, the same setup, the same type of play. h3 is by far the main move in this position for white. Now, it's very important to mention that knight f5, I think, would be a little bit premature. And we, besides just playing bishop f8, I think we can try this idea, bishop f5, e5, bishop f8, and then black will follow up with d5 and so on. So with very nice play in the center. So after h3, another model game that I would like to mention here, played actually in my city in Chicago in 2015. I think like I witnessed this game, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a model game in this variation. h3, bishop f8, white delivered d4, and as I mentioned to you, so usually in this type of position you can see full simplification on d4, like every possible capture. So that was, I don't know, I don't think it matters actually how you capture. I think he started with the pawn e first, so we got this position. Maybe optically it looks not so great because of backward pawn on d6, but in fact active play, rook is open. So and basically black's idea d5, which was successfully carried out in the game that I mentioned. So bishop e6 was played, bishop f4, another important tempo, rook c8. So bishop is hanging, bishop b3, and black delivered d5. Black delivered d5. So usually e5 is the critical move in this type of position, but this time I think black is perfectly prepared. By the way, we have some games played in this position. So knight d7 is coming, and then black actually have, since the pawn bishop d5 is untouchable due to knight b6 pin with the queen. So now black has a very active play where bishop comes to c5, potentially queen to h4. Once we come to c5, we can follow up with d4, or there is another idea, knight b6 c4. So complicated, but pretty much balanced play at this time. So in the game that I mentioned, there was rook d1, bishop c5, bishop c5, queen d2, and d4, and that's obviously pretty symmetrical. And draw was agreed, I think, right here. So that's the game between Azarov and Sevian. So two strong GMs. Okay, so that's the line that we covered with h3. So we go back now. So actually it was move c3 with a very classical play. There is the interesting kind of latest trend, I would say, the move a3. So I guess the idea that first of all, to keep the bishop alive on c4. So then in this case, knight a5 would run into bishop a2, and I think it would be not so great for black, as white will continue with very quick b4. So therefore, we don't see knight a5 in this position quite often. I would rather mention other plan, which starts with bishop e6. Now, another plan that I haven't mentioned today, but it's the second popular idea in this position, to play h6, which seems like just a normal move. After knight d2, knight h7. So the idea to come up with knight g5 to trade pieces, and maybe potentially king h8 to f5 one day. So that's very interesting. Although I got the impression that white is slightly better here. Still, the position is very complicated, very playable. But there was a game of Anish Giri where I think he gained some pleasant advantage in this position, bishop g4. So that's actually an obvious follow-up, because now white is forced to take on g5. Otherwise, the pawn structure on the king side will be ruined. Bishop g5, h3. So now again there is this dilemma. Bishop h5 might run into knight g3 or g4, and the light square bishop will be stuck. So therefore, I think like bishop d7 is very logical, and d4. And I feel like it's a little bit more pleasant for white due to some space advantage. And so the games of bishop f6, queen d2, and then Anish played rook d1 and so on. I like white position here, to be honest. Therefore, I would probably suggest that bishop e6 is a better choice, objectively speaking here. So that's not the first time you see this type of idea here. So basically, black accepts the pawn structure, bishop e6, fe6. And that's just, it's not bad, it's not good, it's just another pawn structure that needs to be studied, and it's double-edged. Maybe the pawn structure is slightly vulnerable, but at the same time, potentially there is a file for active play on the king side. So what we have here after bishop e6, first of all, knight d2 is very logical. And another move, instead of knight d2, knight c3, just allowing to take on c4. I don't think we actually should take. For instance, this move looks to me like the best choice for black in this position. Once again, this move it's not the first time that this move is coming. So now the c6 will come at some point. Now there is the example that I can give you: knight d4, e4, bishop e6, with very strange pawn structure, but overall seems to me pretty okay position for black. I don't think like there are any problems. So now after knight d2, which probably the main choice in my opinion and the most logical idea, so we play queen d7, c3, rook e8. So very complicated play. It's even not exactly, I'm not exactly sure. I guess like b4 would be logical follow-up and bishop f8. So what are the plans? I mean, white's idea, black's idea always to be ready to deliver d6, d5. Still, I guess it's a little bit too early. However, maybe some pawn sacrifices are on the table, and we can recapture with the bishop actually on d5. So very complicated double-edged play, very interesting. Overall, my feeling that black is doing pretty good. Otherwise, like everyone will play a3 always in this position. So, so yes, I think we discussed. Yeah, one more thing that I would like to mention: h3, which looks pretty natural for white. Actually, I think like a serious inaccuracy since we can get the bishop easily with knight a5. So I don't think it's recommended for white players. Obviously, with the point that after bishop a6, we can do a6, bishop a4, b5, and force bishop to b3. And I think just to get the bishop. And I don't think this position is the one where white is fighting for advantage after bishop b7. Okay, so finally we are getting to the main line, which is a4 in this position. After a4, black has a few different plans. I would like to mention the major ideas. So our main move will be knight a5 in this position. Now let's focus on other ideas. The second popular choice in this position is statistically bishop e6. So we have seen this already. Bishop e6. Now knight d2 is the top choice for white. However, I have seen recently a few games where bishop e6 was played, bishop e6, f e6, and c3. Very complicated pawn structure. Sometimes I'm really confused what's going on. Like optically, I like black, but when I start analyzing, it appears to be not. The things are not so simple when white knows how to handle the play on the king side. Overall, I can say that. So here rather, I would probably suggest queen e8. I prefer this move. Seems to me more active than queen d7, which is I think like a top choice according to the theory. Very important to mention that after queen e8, the pawn on e6 will be protected with knight d8. So like black has always to be ready for this move, but we have knight d8, so that's not such a big deal. And very complicated position. Queen is heading to g6 or h5. Knight h5 is option. Very double-edged. Very double-edged. Now another idea that should be mentioned, played by very strong English player Gavin Jones. Instead of playing knight d2, he played knight a3, queen d7, queen d7, and c3. Very interesting setup. Like very few games, but with great statistics for white. I'm sorry, white won basically all 4 games. Still, I don't think it really reflects the evaluation of this position. It's very complicated. We have, I think, like we can do rook e8, bishop f8 as usual. We can try also to play rook a8 as well, and maybe in the future even playing this bishop d8 move. So all this in order to get d5 one day. So very complicated play, but knight d2 is still the main move. After knight d2, we have queen d7 as a top choice. c3. Another idea to go knight f1 right away. To play knight f1 right away. Actually, seems like white is doing pretty well, but all these positions are very unclear. And even I would like to mention that this pawn structure, I'm not sure that this is so bad for black. I mean, it's just a very complicated play. For instance, we can play a5 and then eventually maneuver the knight to e6. So very complicated chess. Usually we see this kind of idea, rook a8, in this position, rook a8, and after knight g3. After knight g3, so there is a choice, but I think maybe it's, to be honest, I haven't checked this in details, but maybe we are ready for d5, or we can maybe wait one move for a6 in order to prevent possibility of bishop b5, but potentially that's the move, d5. So, which should be checked because it seems like we are well prepared for this break. So that's the play in this type of positions. Now c3 here. After queen d7 is probably top choice but yes, it's a top choice by far, because knight f1, bishop c4 overall not very clear pawn structure, so not always white accepts this development. So we can do already well-known regrouping with bishop f8. Again, I would say it's just very complicated play, and again I have to admit that I like black. I think black's play is straightforward, and once again I would like to mention that the main idea is d5. So this is good. Another plan with over 400 games, h6, which is okay for now. It's useful move, just controlling g5, maybe preventing bishop g5, knight g5 in the future, but and then it depends on white play. Black can either go knight h7 g5, or maybe king h8, knight h7 f5, or just to play bishop e6. So it depends how the play develops in this position. So we have after h6, I thought white can play a5, because the thing that a4 is not only securing bishop on c4 but also gaining space on the queen side. After a6, so probably a6, the majority of the games featured a6, because I don't think black should always think about potential a5 a6 move. So here we have knight c3, so that's a very interesting idea. Basically with the pawn on a4, we quite often can see move like knight c3 and not exactly c3. h3, another popular move with some theoretical developments. Here usually knight h7 and knight c3, knight g5, this type of positions. I think quite unclear, double-edged, slightly prefer white, but still playable for black. However, let's say if I would rather prefer knight c3 in this position for white. So now, if you remember in the previous lines, we noticed that after knight c3, bishop g4 is critical, but here in this position, h3, bishop h5, and knight d5 coming very quick. And the idea that after knight d5, bishop d5, we can play g4 very quickly. So I think, well, there is actually the game where knight d4 was followed up, but was met with g4 and knight f3, queen f3. And I think overall, that's the problem of bishop g4 moves. Like bishop on g6 is pretty much stuck. It's just like we practically playing without piece. Actually, it's interesting that in the game that I mentioned, c6 was played. White player was Ganguly, a very strong Indian player. So, but after this, bishop c6, bc6, gh5, white was just, to be honest, much better with the pawn up and potential king h1, rook g1, very dangerous attack. So this is h6 plan. Now bishop g4. I don't like, but still we have a lot of games and I feel like I need to address this. So yeah, actually a lot of Grandmaster games, like kind of surprising to me, but okay. So well, there is a game played by two Chinese players, Wei Yi against Bu, and I think that's a model game in this position. h3, so well, the idea to maintain the spin, knight bd2 obviously, and knight d2, knight d4. So otherwise, if not that knight d4, I think we just play next move c3, covering d4. That will be like very significant advantage for white. So at least knight d4 is coming fast, and there is some play. Knight d4, And now g4, just in time. I think knight f3, queen f3, bishop g6, and queen g3. And I think overall, so white stabilized the position. d5 was played in the game, but objectively speaking, it's not working well. So I think this is something that white should kind of play for after bishop g4. So h3 g4, chasing off the bishop. Eventually, bishop lands on g6, and it's pretty much misplaced. So that's a bishop g4 plan. Now, and now finally we have knight a5. So the whole point, obviously, bishop a2, c5. So knight a5 usually comes together with knight a5. So it's knight a5 followed by c5, as we know this pawn structure. Now we have basically two options. Like it depends what white wants to do with the knight. I believe knight a3 is in like a little bit more interesting, but knight d2 is definitely more classical, I would say. Knight bd2, knight c6. Yeah, there is nothing to do on a5, c3. So this can be reached through, let's say, in this position, if white starts with c3. I think that will transpose eventually. So what we have in this position after c3, bishop e6, classical move, bishop e6. Now this pawn structure, again, double-edged. There is a game, actually highest level between Kramnik and Magnus. So I think like white should play something more positional. Kramnik tried before, and Magnus reacted in a tactical way. He just grabbed the pawn, and after queen b3 played d5. And I think this kind of pawn transformation actually favored black, as black piece is just much better placed, to be honest. And I think like Magnus won this game. So more positional approach in this position would be knight c4, obviously. Knight c4, and now, yes, we have somewhat positional game. Well, surprisingly, this position featured in almost 50 games. h6, covering g5 square, so we shouldn't worry about knight g5. Bishop d2 is one of the main moves in this position. I think here, the idea obviously to prepare this move. So my game here, we can play rook e8, bishop f8, again the same plan. So this is very unclear. Now there is another approach. Actually, there is another approach, is not to take on e6, but rather to play knight c4. I think black's play is not really changes. So we just continue with the same strategy. We play h6 and bishop d2 and rook e8. Bishop d2, rook e8. And in case of b4, I think we're ready to deliver d5 from our side. So very complicated. e5, by the way, I thought that there are two games where knight d5 was played, but my feeling is that after bishop d5, black is doing all right. So now the last line, knight a3, which has to be mentioned. It's a lot of theoretical games. So we come back, knight c6. We already know that's a natural follow-up for us. c3. So we have this position with almost 200 games. Surprisingly, very, very popular position. So one plan is to try to play a6 and then rook b8 and deliver b5, but still the top choice remains h6 in this position. h6, bishop d2. So we already know this is the type of position with knight a3 where white tries to carry out b4 and not d4. After bishop d2, a6. Well, it's rather like very interesting positional play. I thought h3 should be played. In case of b4, black is well prepared and ready to strike with d5. So now b4 pawn is hanging. Seems like black is doing pretty good. Now after knight c4, in this position, knight c4, we obviously switch to bishop e6 setup. So something like h3, and then rather like rook e8, bishop f8. I don't think there is a reason to rush with b5, so we can keep it for the latest stage. Now h3, move 12. So that's kind of like main theoretical position. So we have rook b8 with a lot of games played recently in 2018. I think, well, two moves, rook b8, rook e8. I think rook e8 is a little bit more precise. White usually starts with knight c2. Now, once again, this is the same story that after b4, c4, c4, we have d5 right away. Black is well prepared for this strike. So after knight c2, bishop e6. Also, the idea which is well known. So I witnessed this game, bishop e6, f e6 before. So it seems like both sides kind of like carry around their ideas. c4, now knight b4 or c4. I think c4, black would just play b5. Complicated, but pretty much equal position, in my opinion. Black is quite solid. Knight b4, I thought a little bit more interesting from white perspective, so that there is queen b3 coming pretty fast. But on the other hand, we are not forced to take on b4, so we can play knight a5. So very complicated middle game, double-edged. So there is a game between two grandmasters from recent Olympiad, which ended in a draw. I think it's just unclear, double-edged, balanced position here. So I think we are more or less done with this line, where I was able, fortunately, to cover the main directions. Hopefully the material was clear and you can benefit in your games.
So it was wonderful session, sir. It's time for Q&A now, guys. You can put your questions in Q&A box so that we can answer them. So we have got few questions. First question is from Neo Binu. So since it's summer holiday time in India, so he's asking, sir, is 5 hours per day chess training enough for me for these holidays?
So you know, like it's not about, I think it's not about hours, it's about efficient training, yeah, and how well you train. It's you know, if you do like 10 hours but it's something useless and doesn't help you, that's a problem. I mean, I can tell you that if you have availability of 5 hours, that's great. That's no doubts about this. But it's just very important to be efficient. So well, I hope you can get some advice of somebody who is like coach, experienced player, or something like that, in order to make these lessons more effective.
Okay, so next question is from some anonymous attendee, and he's asking, what should we play against the stone wall?
I don't think it's in our list, right? I mean, I can only say that I can refer to my book. I think actually my latest book, which was released I think 2 months ago, I cover Stonewall. Just to give some heads up, it's a fianchetto system with g3, bishop g2, which is the main line, and this is what I prefer. But overall, Stonewall is pretty solid, and I have definitely some respect to Stonewall structure for black. Well, I mean, not Stonewall structure, but Stonewall as an opening.
So the next question is from Sandeep Nagare, and he's asking how to avoid draw or loss against lower rated players.
Well, you know, I think like we have, I understand the point of this question. I think it's like maybe phrased not in the best way, but If I would know how to avoid loss in general, like that would be great. But but the point is that I think when you play against such a players, you should be not paying too much attention to the level, to the rating, and just, as we say among grandmasters, just playing against the pieces. You know, so we're just trying to play the best moves and not thinking about the fact that he's low rated, he might not see something, you know, because we sometimes we can face the players that significantly underrated, so they can find very strong moves. So you just should play natural good moves like you play against anyone. So that would be probably my recipe.
So the next question is from some, again, anonymous friendly, and he's asking, I want to prepare Sicilian main lines from white side. So which book should I prefer? Earlier, I used to play Sicilian side lines like Alapin and Mora Gambit.
Yeah, well, I think the books for E4 repertoire, like which kind of like became in some way classical. I hopefully like as my D4 repertoire is the books of Indian Grandmaster Negi, Paramajan Negi. So he has a series of E4 for white where he covers. I'm not exactly sure. No, I think he definitely covered Sicilian. I'm not. I think he basically completed everything. You know, I know I have some. So there is like French Caro-Kann, but I know that some books Sicilian. Well, to be honest, I didn't open this Sicilian book, but I know that it should be covered. Yeah, so it's maybe not that fresh, but he's a well-renowned theoretician, Negi. He's not active. Maybe you don't know this name right now, but he was considered to be one of the top theoreticians in the world. And his material, from what I have seen from other openings, is very high level. So, but it's like very advanced. But in terms of like you want material, that's a great books.
So the next question is from Sumant, and he's asking, my rating is 1062. So should I continue to play London system?
1062. Yeah, I mean, well, that's the rating right now where like maybe the openings are not that significant. So if you play London and you understand, I don't see anything wrong about this. It's just like more, let's say when you play London, it's like you probably more focused on middle game because London is pretty much similar setup everywhere. So hopefully if you attend these classes, so you can expand a little bit. Because with London, you more or less say, whatever happens, whatever black setup, I'll play the same. So, but hopefully this course, if you attend, so that would help you to expand with ideas, with the pawn structure and everything. I see the question here, one of the players asking whether we're gonna cover bishop c4, bishop c5. So from the next class, we start bishop c4, bishop c5, which is obviously a logical question because that's the most popular line in Italian.
So I think we are done with questions. That's it for today, and we will meet again in the next session next Friday, same time and same place. So till then, bye bye everyone, and bye bye Boris.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to mention because I saw the follow-up about Stonewall. What is the name of the book? It's my first D4 Grandmaster repertoire series. You can find it's like, well, there is a chess publishing house, Quality Chess, so you can go there, or I don't know if you have some maybe others like publishing houses from India, so you can find just like Grandmaster repertoire by Avruch, volume number 4, I think, released 2019 or 18. I think 19. So you can find Stonewall there. Yeah, thank you very much for moderating, and we'll be in touch, guys.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for attending. Hopefully you can benefit and score a lot of wins with my material. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.